Hello. Oh, this is on. Okay. We are going to talk about some tools and workflows for integrating archival metadata with Wikidata at the University of Washington Libraries. We would like to acknowledge the people on this slide for contributing their time and expertise to this project. The Labor Archives of Washington, or LAW, has generously provided its finding aids as an experimental data set. We selected this dataset because it is a manageable size and describes socially and historically significant collections. LAW was founded in 2010 as a collaboration between the UW Libraries and the Harry Bridges Center for Labor Studies, with support from the local labor community. It is one of the largest repositories for labor materials in the United States. These highlighted topics and events illustrate why these collections matter. They are primary sources on socially important historical topics from the perspectives of working class people in our region. Metadata about these collections is dispersed over multiple platforms. We treat the EAD finding aid published in Archives West as the data of record. Further metadata is generated by multiple groups of people using multiple workflows. EAD finding aids are published in Archives West, which publishes URIs for each collection. We use XSLT to generate batches of bibliographic records based on archival finding aids in OCLC connection. Catalogers go through these by hand to enhance the records, sometimes creating authority records in the process. OCLC generates URIs for bibliographic records linked to finding aids, and NACO records generate Library of Congress URIs and sometimes include URIs from other vocabularies. The SNAC Cooperative publishes linked data entities associated with the collections in Archives West. This generates identifiers and links with related descriptions from selected datasets. Relationships with other entities based on finding aids are published as linked data. University of Washington staff do not edit SNAC data, and its identifiers are not consistently included in catalog records. Law volunteers and employees, community members, and historians contribute Wikipedia articles about entities with collections in the labor archives. There are often references to finding aids for collections and articles linked to relevant Wikidata items where they exist. Academics, community members, journalists, and others publish resources on entities in law collections. Some, like this one from the UW Seattle Civil Rights and Labor History Project, make reference to law collections. These are occasionally used as reference sources in authority records, but aren't generally used in catalog records. Challenges have arisen in our current archival metadata ecosystem. There are inconsistencies between platforms, a lack of consistent connection between description sets about the same entities, and a lack of consistent connection between interrelated entities. With shrinking staff time and squeezed budgets, it has been difficult to address these problems using traditional full-level cataloging and identity management work. And this is where Wikidata comes in. Wikidata is known to be an outstanding identifier hub to help with discovery and to provide access to data all over the semantic web. Anyone, including people in the labor community, can contribute to Wikidata for free. Tools for power editing are open source, and the data structure is relatively flexible, so we can add properties and items to suit our needs. We started to try to meet our challenges with a series of small Wikidata projects with the common goal of taking advantage of Wikidata to enhance semantic web descriptions of archival collections at the labor archives. This chart represents the additions these projects have made to existing workflows, and also indicates where records and RDF entities link to one another as a result of our efforts. Here's a brief overview of what's new. We use Python, OpenRefine, and Quick Statements to generate Wikidata items for creators of the collections based on the EAD finding aids. We use MARC and OpenRefine to generate Wikidata items for the collections themselves based on the MARC records. Links between these description sets are generated within each workflow, and more are added at the end using OpenTools, Python, and XSLT. Now we're going to get into some details, and I will turn it over to Adam.
Okay, now we've got to find the... Okay, here we go. So when the UW Libraries joined the Program for Cooperative Cataloging's Wikidata pilot project, one of the first things we did was create a variety of application profiles for the various types of entities we would be describing in Wikidata. For this project, we developed one for archival collections, starting by creating some Wikidata items by hand and identifying the properties we needed to adequately describe a collection. In the process, we also discovered some properties that were desirable but not yet available in Wikidata, such as the identifier for finding aids in the Archives West repository. We designated some properties as mandatory and some as optional, and included qualifiers to properties that might be used. The application profile also provides catalogers with examples illustrating the use of the properties. Our application profiles are maintained in Wikidata and are living documents that can be revised as new properties are added to Wikidata or as we discover uses for other existing properties. So here's a screenshot of our archival metadata application profile developed for this project. Bolded properties are mandatory if applicable and if data for that property is known. Unbolded properties are optional. The profile lists the name of the property, examples of how it might be used, qualifiers that may be applicable, and usage notes. This is just more of the application profile, showing some additional properties that we will use in describing our collections. And you can see there are examples in some of the boxes in the table. And again, still more properties, and note that the last two on this page are unbolded, so that means they're optional. Finally, at the very end of our application profile, just like in Wikidata items, we have a section for identifiers. And we are using two identifier properties for this project, the Archives West Finding Aid ID, which links to the finding aid for the collection in Archives West, and the OCLC control number, which links to the bibliographic description in OCLC WorldCat. Now, one of the identifiers I realized early on that we needed was the identifier for our finding aids in Archives West. Archives West is an online aggregator of over 40,000 finding aids for collections in 48 repositories in 6 western U.S. states. We made two identifier property proposals related to Archives West Finding Aid ID and the repository ID. Every finding aid on Archives West has the same base URL followed by a unique identifier. We could take advantage of this stable pattern to make a property that can link out from Wikidata to each finding aid. The second property for repository ID links out from a Wikidata item for the repository itself to all of the finding aids from that repository that are in Archives West. So any editor in Wikidata can propose a new property, and it's actually not too difficult to learn how to do so. Proposals are done in Wikidata, and there is help available as well. Once a proposal has been made, it's open for community discussion. Each weekly status update published on Mondays lists proposals submitted in the previous week. The minimum time for discussion before a property can be created is 1 week, but some discussions may take longer to reach consensus. And I've had one property that I think took about 2 years to finally reach consensus. But typically 1 week to 2 weeks is the norm. Once there's consensus to approve a proposal, it will be marked as ready. And then a property creator can create that property. Property creators are not permitted to create their own proposals, however. There are currently about 48 people who can create properties, but any editor may apply for this status, and I am one of those 48 people. So when these proposals get approved, I could not create them. I had to wait for somebody else to come in and create them. So this is what our proposal for the Archives West Finding Aid looks like. The first part of the proposal consists of data about the potential property, such as its data type, allowed values, what Wikidata item it represents or corresponds to, examples of how it would be used, and for identifiers, what URL is used to link outside Wikidata from a recorded identifier value. Below this, in the section, the first part of the section in white, the proposer must provide a section about motivation for making the proposal. You can see in this case I didn't write very much. And then the very last section is the discussion within the community. And there are various ways that people can indicate their support. You can see that from this example we actually got only support, which was nice. And so if the discussion is entirely or mostly supportive and there are no significant objections, a property creator will mark the proposal after at least a week as ready to create. So here's a finding aid in Archives West for one of our collections, and you can see from the URL at the top of the screen, it's the same except for the very last part, which is the unique identifier for that particular finding aid. And that's the identifier that we will be using in the Archives West Finding Aid ID. And you can see here in this item for one of our collections, the two identifiers recorded as statements. If you click on the Archives West Finding Aid, it will take you out to the finding aid in Archives West. And I'm going to turn it back over to Crystal.
All right. The workflow that we use to generate Wikidata items for collection creators is documented in these GitHub and Wiki project pages. We used Python to extract nodes from the finding aids and performed reconciliation against Wikidata and OpenRefine. We used the Wikidata extension to export a quick statements batch from OpenRefine for item creation. We use the new Archives app property along with Archives West Finding Aid IDs for each entity. Quick Statements offered us a quick and dirty method of generating items for creators of our collections. I have been going back over these items by hand, doing more granular identity management work in NACO and Wikidata as time allows. This is much more time consuming. Here's an example of one of our Wikidata items. So you see we have many aliases for this organization, Region 37 of the IBU ILWU, it's a Longshoremen's Union in Seattle. We have a link to a Wikipedia article about the union local. It's significant because it was the first Filipino-led union in the United States. As we scroll down, we see our Archives app properties for the photo collection and the records collection, along with location information and our link to the item for the collection, which came later. Apologize for the size of these slides, but our slides are up online, so you should be able to find them if you cannot read them here. We've got many identifiers, and we link to SNAC, which does its own linked data descriptions. And then when we go into the derived statements, we can really see how rich this linked data is. Each of the Wikidata items in these derived statements is treated in the same way as this union local. And we also created some items for significant historical events that happened connected with this local. After the PCC Wikidata pilot, we wanted to go further by bringing together our EAD and MARC 21 and Wikidata descriptions. We wanted to create items for our archival collections that link to our EAD and MARC 21 description sets, and put links to those Wikidata items back into our finding aids and catalog records. Starting these items from the catalog records rather than the finding aids surfaced inconsistencies in our existing workflows. We were able to take several opportunities to improve our MARC 21 bibliographic data. This workflow is documented on the Wiki project page and GitHub repository. We started by collecting the relevant MARC 21 bibliographic records in the OCLC local bibliographic save file, and then we opened them in MARC Edit and converted them into a tab delimited text file, and opened that file in OpenRefine as a new project, and cleaned up and reconciled the data in OpenRefine. We modified an existing batch workflow from the PCC Wikidata pilot to accommodate archival metadata. There are detailed instructions for the workflow on our wiki project pages. The most notable enhancement that we made was including over 1,800 subjects. These were more difficult to parse and reconcile than the other data points, but for these collections, we think that it was worthwhile. The subjects bring out the important connections these collections have with each other and with labor history in our region. Cleanup and reconciliation are the most time-consuming parts of this process, and there's room for improvement of our workflow using tools in OpenRefine to automate more steps. We welcome your help. Once we had cleaned and reconciled the data, we created a Wikidata schema for new collection items. And here's a peek at our schema. It's available for download as a JSON file in GitHub and can be customized using the Wikidata extension for OpenRefine in a graphical user interface or directly in the JSON file itself. Once we finished our schema, we previewed our changes and uploaded them to Wikibase using OpenRefine. We added a column for the new QIDs and exported the project as a spreadsheet to help us with adding links back into our finding aids and catalog records. We put links to Wikidata in new 758 fields in the MARC records using MARC Edit's OCLC API integration and an XSLT script. There's more detailed documentation on this workflow on our Wiki project page and GitHub repository. We used a Python script to insert the Wikidata URIs into the finding aids. And then here are some of the pain points we discovered during our project. We took these opportunities to improve our data and workflows where we could. Some law collections had fallen through the cracks as cataloging workflows evolved over the years, and we made sure that those collections got cataloged. We noticed that changes to the collection extents, inclusive dates, and other changes from new accessions or further processing in EAD finding aids were not consistently making it back into our catalog records. Our bibliographic records lacked archival inventory numbers, and many of the links to finding aids in 856 fields were broken or missing, which is a big problem. Changes to finding aid information reflected in catalog records, such as corrected typos or significant changes to titles, had not consistently carried back over into finding aids either. We encountered difficulties in Wikidata when we changed application profile decisions and wanted to change or remove statements we had previously made in bulk. And as I mentioned, the processes for reconciliation and data cleanup in OpenRefine are time-consuming. In the future, we would like to put together some pre-processing guidance and tools for enhancing MARC 21 records for archival collections. We would like to better coordinate our workflows for MARC 21 and EAD finding aid descriptions, encouraging agreement between both formats. We would like to add some law oral histories recently published on the Internet Archive to this pilot, and we would also very much like to see this workflow extended to larger archival collections at the UW libraries. And that's all we had, so now I think we have some time for questions. Oh.
Yes, so thank you very much, Crystal and Adam, and we indeed do have time for some questions.
Oh, it is hard to see that.
Hi, thank you for your elaborate presentation on the creation of proposals from an organizational point of view. And I was really wondering, because you also got a lot of feedback on the creation of your proposal, and I was wondering what type of feedback you received from the community itself on your P numbers.
In this case, I think most of the feedback were from other participants in the program for cooperative cataloging Wikidata pilot. So during that pilot project, when I made proposals, I announced them to we have a discussion list, and we have a Slack channel, and I announced them. So I said, if you'd like to support this, or if you don't support it, please go to the discussion and speak up. So occasionally, I know I've done a lot of proposals, and occasionally outside of the PCC, I do get both positive and sometimes negative comments, and I've had a couple things rejected over the years.
So what was the basis for the rejection of your proposals?
That can be a variety of things. Either some people don't feel the resource is notable enough to have a property. There are people, I have done a number of biological names properties, and there's always one or two people who are just curmudgeons and just don't like it because they say it's not authoritative enough. But my view is that Wikidata is supposed to link to everything as much as possible. So some of the other questions, we had one where we had a proposal for participant in movies that aren't actors, and that took a lot of discussion because it had been modeled as a cast member, and we had a long time arguing with the community that these people are not cast members. They are interviewees in documentaries and things like that. So we had struggled with the name for that. In RDA, there was a relationship called on-screen participant, and the community did not like that. So we ended up with participant, I forget the specific thing, but yeah. So the reasons are all over the map.
Thank you.
Thanks. We do have time for another question.
Thank you for this great presentation. I wonder how you build Wikidata knowledge within your organization. People had to learn about Wikidata. It's often not so familiar for bibliographers. And how did you manage this?
We have a very supportive administration when it comes to linked data projects, which is great. And Wikidata resources are free, which helps us convince them that we should do these projects. And Adam actually learned a lot about Wikidata and then trained others. So I think there's just been a lot of natural curiosity about Wikidata at our institution. And the curator at the Labor Archives was very interested in getting his metadata into Wikidata. So it's been fairly easy. People have signed up for trainings and wanted to participate.
What hasn't been easy is institutionalizing Wikidata as part of the jobs of all catalogers. And so when we joined the PCC Wikidata pilot project, I spent a lot of time becoming as much of an expert as I could in Wikidata. And then we trained all of our catalogers. They all got trained. And then we put out a call for volunteers as to who would like to participate in the project. And we have about 25 catalogers, and about half of them volunteered. And at the end of that pilot project, we met as a unit to say, okay, what have we learned? What do we want to do in the future? And that's where we are stuck. We haven't been able to come to an agreement that whether all catalogers should now be doing some Wikidata as part of their name authority work or some other kind of work. And so we still have people who are in the pilot who are continuing to do Wikidata because we're supportive of that, but we haven't been able to find a way to yet agree to institutionalize this for everyone.
Okay, thanks again, two of you. And please be sure to continue the conversation over coffee or lunch.